Aloha and welcome to East Meets West, a cross-cultural journey where we invite a professional from Hawaii and a professional from Japan to come and have a discussion about topics that affect all of us, no matter where we are living. Good afternoon. My name is Deidre Teagarden. I'm the Executive Director here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where our mission is to inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of our Nisei veterans. We have a lovely global audience joining us today, and we want to thank all of you for being here. To our friends from Japan, we'd just like to say, Honjitsu wa o isogashii nakaご参加くださり誠にありがとうございます. Today, we invite you into this conversation between Doctors Maya Soetoro and Mariko Gakiya as they talk about everything from leadership to cultural awareness to peace and human resilience through COVID-19. And I'm so excited to be able to co-moderate this today with our board of director, Ms. Kyoko Kimura. Now, before I introduce our guests, I would just like to let everybody know that, as always, we love to get questions. So please feel free to type your questions as you get them in that little question and answer box at the bottom left of your screen. We will get to as many as time allows. And again, we want to thank our sponsors who make this program and all of our programs possible here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center. And if you'd like more information on the center, please visit our website at nvmc.org. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers today, beginning with Dr. Maya Soetoro. Dr. Maya serves as a consultant, there we go, to the Obama Foundation, working closely with their international team to develop programming in the Asia-Pacific region. Prior to her work with the Obama Foundation, she was the director of the Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where, in addition to leading outreach and development initiatives, she also taught leadership for social change, history of peace movements, peace education, and conflict management for educators. She was awarded a master's degree in secondary education from NYU's College of Education and a PhD in multicultural education from the University of Hawaii. For many years, she worked at the University of Hawaii College of Education, where she taught multicultural education, social studies methods, and peace education at both the graduate and undergraduate levels. Maya has published a number of book contributions, as well as a picture book entitled Ladder to the Moon, and is currently under contract to write a young adult novel entitled Yellowwood. Maya sits on many voluntary boards and is the co-founder of the nonprofit Seeds for Peace, which creates peace-building action plan workshops for educators, families, and community leaders. And she is the co-founder of the Institute for Climate and Peace, which advances effective and inclusive processes to build peaceful and climate-conscious futures for the well-being of all. Our next speaker is Dr. Mariko Gakiya. Dr. Gakiya's research aims to advance the understanding and practice of organizational learning and change. She takes an innovative approach to leadership education and social entrepreneurship, putting the focus on human resiliency, well-being, and peace building. She is particularly interested in how the physical and psychosocial environment shapes human development and societal well-being. She is interested in issues around gender equality, human security, and digital transformation with the goal of creating a healthy ecosystem based on humanistic, moral, and ethical principles. Dr. Gakiya serves on the executive boards of several organizations, including the Boston Global Forum and Global Women for Well-Being, and advises leaders of international development organizations, foundations, think tanks, corporations, and higher education institutions. She was the founding faculty director of the Global Leadership Program for the Graduate School of Medicine at the University of Tokyo, and has served on the faculties and advisory committees of Harvard University, Keio University, Presidency University, and others. She earned a doctorate degree in administration, planning, and social policy in education, Harvard University, after her postgraduate work at the University of Oxford. Her BA in TESOL and psychology is from Hawaii Pacific University. And I'd also like to introduce our co-moderator today, Ms. Kyoko Kimura. Kyoko is a 30-year veteran of the resort and hotel industry. She has served as general manager of a luxury resort, as well as in the corporate office of a hotel management company, and represents many hotel owners. She has served as a simultaneous interpreter for President George H.W. Bush, and currently serves on our board, the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, and she's on the board of directors for the Hawaii Tourism Authority. A graduate of Kobe College, Ms. Kimura also attended Cornell Hotel School. She is married to a fourth-generation Japanese American who can trace his lineage to the Ganenmono. She and her husband have 2 daughters. Their eldest is a graduate of Waseda University and is currently pursuing her master's degree in London, and their younger daughter is a junior at New York University. So I want to welcome all of you. Aloha, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon. So thanks. So Kyoko and I just want to start off this conversation by talking about the two of you, Maya and Mariko. You both have such incredibly fascinating and unique backgrounds. Can you start off and just tell us a little bit about your background? Maya, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Deidre and Kyoko. And thank you so much to the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center as well for having me. I was born in Indonesia and spent my formative years there and had a very multicultural upbringing, spending time all over Indonesia, but also elsewhere in Asia and Hawaii. Indonesia influenced my commitments to peace and conflict resolution, both because of its positive, peaceful attributes like its syncretic, blended hybrid culture that allowed for complexity, but also because of its negative attributes like violence against certain ethnic groups and religions. So I grew up, I guess, with a lot of complexity, a lot of beauty, but also poverty, a lot of community, but also conflict. My mother and father were both sojourners and scholars who met at the East-West Center in Hawaii. And I spent much of my life in Hawaii, as well as Asia, especially Southeast Asia. I went to New York City for college and to start my career as a social studies educator and peace educator, and returned to Hawaii to be closer to my family and get a PhD in multicultural education at UH Manoa about 21 years ago. And here I've been focused on teaching peace education, teaching most recently at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace, but before that at the College of Education, and defining peace very broadly as inclusive of human rights, social justice, indigenous peace, personal peace, and much more. And as you mentioned, I started some nonprofits. And although my professional background has been tied to positive peace building, and I strive to help others see the ways that they can contribute to peace, justice, and conflict transformation, I also spend a lot of time working with young global leaders through the Obama Foundation leadership programs, and have a strong commitment to the Asia Pacific region.
Thank you. And Mariko, can you give us a little bit of a background, your personal background?
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning to our Japanese audience. First of all, and then most of all, I really salute for organizing this event, and the spirit and the value of this center very much deeply ingrained. And then also I applaud for my work that I'm really pursuing to understand further. And also who I am today, it's really the appreciation coming from Hawaii, where I learned to speak English when I was a teenager. And everyone in Hawaii, people of Hawaii, really, trained me and then nurtured my interest and who I am. So after a few decades, I left Hawaii in 80s or early 90s and went to Boston area, and then also UK and Geneva, and then Africa and all other parts of the world. And this is the first time since early 90s that I am in touch with Hawaii. So I am enormously grateful the opportunity that I'm connecting to you and then Maya and then others, and very much look forward to the conversation. So I like to echo and enjoy the Maya's amazing experiences and appreciation of human life. Yes, when I was a teenager, my parents would struggle. What's this, the girls, me, Mariko, is very curious, but I didn't know what to do with the life. So they decided to send me to Hawaii and then first to learn English. When I learned English along the way, I started to talk to, people from all different backgrounds, from Malaysia to Indonesia to China, and then also Middle East, and then as you know, the Hawaii is melting pot. When you look at the different corner, you meet so many different ethnic background and then value system. But what I have really learned is to how you can build relationship and then learn different perspectives to honor the culture that we are aiming for the common future. I think that foundation really built um, my interest to learn, continue to learn, and there's so much unknown place in the world. The books can teach very good foundation, but when you are really in the field, you really learn the amazing resilience of human beings. So that initial, a take on my perspective in the education was very powerful ground. And when I was in Japan, I was a very good student. But in high school, because of confining of Japanese traditional, a very conservative way of mode of education, instructional strategy and design, I got bored. So when I came to Hawaii, a very innovative approach to teaching, and then teaching about the real cultural and then international affairs brought me to further study. And I still remember that. Yes, I graduated from University Hawaii Pacific Universities. At the same time, I was taking the classes, and then I was TA, teaching assistant, to the Dr. Ollins, who still teaches at the University of Hawaii in the philosophy department. So I had the two hats as a student to continue to learn. And surprisingly, I became so interested in academic pursuit. So I went to the graduate school in Boston, and then wanted to study more. And my parents was puzzled. Oh, she hated school, but now wanted to study more. And so I went to also in UK to get my master's degree. And I have two master's degree from Boston University first, and then Oxford, and then transferred to the Harvard. It's just incredible. People around me really gave essence of what it means to learn, get a knowledge, but at the same time to be responsible of what we learn, and different, traditional culture and a different perspective, values that we put in the books. But the books can be written by the particular group of, individual or political parties. So we have to be very receptive and appreciative of really instilling a different perspective. Where my first job was actually at the UNESCO in Paris. And then that took me to have a strong interest in pursuing more on the cultural diversity side. So I went to study and then work for international diplomacy, and that got me to work in Africa, and I actually lived in Africa, in Ghana first, and then went on to work in South Africa, where I met the Nelson Mandela when I was in my 20s. So that was profound, incredible experience to witness what it means to have a responsibility and what it means to build a nation, build a human ecosystem that can really harmonize to live for the coexistence of the virtue that we can build through the education, at the same time, civil society that we can build. And I was very naive, and then I didn't have much knowledge about, whole aspect of nation building. That really asked myself to study further. So I went back to study, and then I got my doctorate in administration planning, social policy, so public policy. And then I was very interested in knowing about the history of, slavery to, industrial development, and then also how can we build a society that we can all harness each other's benefit and the talent and then the skills. And what are the systems that can really allow us to do that? That was something that I really started to question about myself, and then to, organization that we designed to develop, and then, education system that we all be part of. So that was the interest that I tried to investigate and then study during my doctorate years. And then I got it, and my advisor, actually, who just passed away a few weeks ago in Boston. So I really wanted to, give my tribute to, his name is Dr. Richard Elmore, amazing educational policy guru, volunteer, commitment that he made. He also worked in South Africa and, other parts of Southeast Asia. And his motto was always think about, the peace building, but at the same time of beauty of bringing inner peace into ourselves, but to others. So that was very important for me to bring a whole aspect of integral, the multidisciplinary approach to have a conversation in peace building. Yes, peace is a very complex terrain of conversation to understand human civilization and then so on. But the bottom line is that I have a huge appreciation of people who work in this area, and education is very key. As Nelson Mandela said that education is a powerful weapon that we can really bring all the humans together.
It is,
So,
and I think it's something we had talked about earlier. Both of your backgrounds have led you to both become educators, and I think, Mariko, you kind of touched upon it in these remarks. Why it's so important to to be educated, but to also in turn become an educator. And I'd like to ask you both, what do you feel like your upbringing, your international global upbringing at different ages, had a role in your field as an educator? And maybe Maya, you can jump in on this one too. Do you feel like you became an educator because of your upbringing?
Yeah, yes, I do. In part, it was probably my mother, and my mother would have loved Dr. Mariko, and I appreciate her as well as a sister, because she has such curiosity and she understands the importance of moving into multiple communities with humility. And even though you have book knowledge, it's still important to listen, right? And our mother was really a significant model for me and instrumental to my work in education specifically, and to my work as a peace builder, because she homeschooled me and we went to many communities throughout my childhood. She shared her strong commitment and connection not only to nature, but also to village life. We would look under rocks and find bugs and catch tadpoles and set them free, but we would also spend hours in conversation in communities, mostly rural. She was a pioneer in microfinance, helping mostly women in rural Asian communities to develop cottage industries, wherein they were able to not only make their small businesses thrive, whether they were basket weavers or textile makers or pottery makers, but also to find more autonomy and support their families, educate their children, and feel a sense of strength. And I would accompany her while she visited these communities, and she spent a lot of time listening, leaning in. She did double listening or careful listening, where she would listen in between the words and listen for stories to demonstrate the value of connected learning and collaborative endeavor, and listening to build connections among individuals as well as cultures. And she felt wherever she went that she could build family. And she had such a respect for multiple cultures and ideologies and religions, and did an excellent job of building bridges. When she was dying, she had stage 4 ovarian and uterine cancer. And she said to me, Maya, you know, originally I thought I wanted to be buried under a beautiful tree where I could enjoy visits from you, reading poetry to me, sharing stories about your children, my grandchildren. But I've changed my mind. She said, I think that I would like to be scattered in the ocean. She said, because how else am I going to get to all of the beautiful people and places that I love so much? And even in death, she knew that she wanted to be connected. And I think that when she died in 1995, that was when I completed my master's at NYU, and I started to build with others an alternative public middle school on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And her life set the standard for me for what a community school should look like. We had weekly community service projects and daily meetings where students would prop each other up with loving acknowledgments of work. And on Saturdays, I would take them to museums. And although each student had a subway pass, they rarely left their 10-block radius before this, not feeling that they were welcome or valued. So as educators, it was important for us to help them cross these invisible barriers, to feel that they were part of something larger, that they mattered, that their voices would be heard. And so I often look to my mother's community work to find inspiration for that. You know, to think of learning as moving beyond the four walls of a classroom. I also think about my upbringing, and I just wanted to share two more stories. One is that, you know, I did grow up in an Indonesia that experienced a lot of anti-Chinese riots. And in Semarang, in Jakarta, in Java, when I was a child, I witnessed my neighbors who were very kind to me, giving me sugarcane and asking after my family and showing me great generosity. I witnessed them throw stones in the windows of Chinese shop owners, to turn over cars belonging to Chinese citizens. These are Chinese Indonesians. So they were Indonesian citizens, ethnically Chinese, and then set these cars on fire. And what I realized was that we have to be vigilant, that people can be very loving and kind to those with whom they feel that familial connection, and yet do terrible things. Human beings are capable of you know, depth of despair and hurt and rage and violence, but they're also capable of great heroism and capable of being upstanders. So we have to nourish the very best in humans. And those memories, which were very confusing to me as a child, helped to shape my priorities as an educator. When I returned to Indonesia later in life, in 2013, I went to the Universitas Islam Indonesia, the Indonesian Islamic University, and there I saw these Hindu ruins that in 2010, some years prior, they had found during an excavation. And they informed me that rather than shipping those um, Hindu temple ruins off, they decided to become stewards and caretakers of the ruin. And so then Hindu pilgrims came to the Islamic University. And um, I thought that was such a beautiful representation of how we can really care for one another and love one another. And I think of Dr. Mariko and how it in Okinawa and in places like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, how you see evidence there of people who have transformed pain and sorrow with such forgiveness and generosity to reach out and set this priority for peace and to heal and to move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. And that is the very essence of being, an educator, of teaching, of learning, and of loving. And I think of the kintsugi pottery of, where you take the gold and you take a broken pottery and you remake it to something more beautiful by putting its pieces together with this gold binding. And I think of, the Japanese people after the suffering of World War II and with such great admiration for their capacity to do that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those beautiful stories. Like I know Dr. Mariko touched about her upbringing and educator experience, but I wanted to ask Dr. Mariko that during this pandemic of COVID, especially in Japan, I heard a lot of sad news that more women are affected than men, that a lot of the suicide of the women rate jumped, or the new mothers are depressed, or more women lost their jobs. And is that how's the situation there, and what do you vision the solution of the society should be?
Well, thank you, Kyoko. These issues, it's really hit every part of my life, and then my student and my colleague. As you know, this women's and gender inequality is very deep in its structural barriers. When you look at the history of economic development and then the legal protection for women. So there is no one single solution. It's a very important in a document to see is in 1987 when the, equal rights for employment went in effect. But what is really critical is that yes, we have a legal protection, but a cultural law for women to role is still severely ingrained and in the practice in the Japanese culture that women have to follow the traditional role, and after married and have a kids, and then women are they usually to take care of the family and have such a burden to raise. So when you look at all the statistics, I just had actually gave a talk to the government agency about women's empowerment and inequalities. And I know some of the people that who actually made the proposal, but bottom line is that because of the employment system in Japan, that the men work very long hours. Okay, so seniority and the lifelong employment, that is really bringing these issues. What happened was that after a Japanese industry that became open and privatized, women actually took all the part-time jobs. So no job security and the benefit. So when the COVID hit, all this inequality in the employment system really brought to the surface that women are the first one to really, get rid of the, left the employment system, and no jobs available and no, protection for them. So it's very sad. What I hear from, my graduate student is that when you go to now the, train station, Shinjuku, other places, that the young women who are in 20s and 30s are actually homeless. And it's very, I won't say the sadness, but I think I took it as the responsibility that what we can really do to make sure that we take care of it. It's our duty as a Japanese to make sure that we really voice it, make sure that we understand the magnitude of problems this is gonna take some generation to overcome. But what we need to do is, again, it's a policy decision, but we really need to educate the young women that doing nothing and just silence is part of the problem. So we have to make sure that the bring to the table. Yes, statistically, you're right. Since last year, from the summer to up to the last year, 80% jumped up for the suicide rate. I have been really following that. So when you look at all the numbers that are coming from, the government or other, particular agency, and then also mental health is very, very severely affected. The women are losing their confidence, and this is the structural and the systemic barriers, and then we really need to improve the situation. So that's why I decided that this year I decided to really work in this area, rather than living in Boston. I still have my duties, so I'll go back and forth, but it's still really trying to work in Japan for the future of our generation, but really bringing external, the knowledge and in the practice to make sure that the future generation is connected to what we have achieved in the past, but look at the present and then forge for the future, prosperity. That's what I'm doing. And then also I just need to touch upon, because yes, thank you for, Dr. Maya, that I'm from Okinawa, but my parents, my grandparents, never talked about the war experience because it was so painful. It was extremely painful that they couldn't talk. But as I get older and then study more in a different field, I recognize that how their coping strategy was developed. And then it was me that started to talk to my mother, was so dedicated to the Red Cross. She is incredibly dedicated to the community development, always working for others. So when I was listening to Dr. Maya's talk, then I just have such an admiration of her life. That era to go into the different field to talk to the village people and in microfinance, that time for the women in Asia, that's an incredible courage. So, the woman actually has a tremendous role to play. My mother, luckily still alive, and then always talk about other people, what I should be doing to help others. So that's, I think, what we can really harness that and then nurture that, make sure that, but this is a different level. They have done amazing work, but our generation is to make sure that, we make it into the action. And then March 8th, next week, following week is the International Women's Day. I think we should really think about how we can bring to the ground that we can see the improvement in the life of all these women who are suffering. I think, this conversation that we are having, hopefully that leads to some action. So thank you for this question.
Sorry, now your Olympic committee chair is a woman and some light over there. And both of you have such an influential mothers. I have two daughters behind my virtual background here. I don't know if they're listening. I also wanted to ask Dr. Maya, not so much gender, but over here in this country, there's because of the pandemic, we have such a division between the ethnic background, between the political parties. What is your take into this division in this country?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think that COVID has also exacerbated and made those conflicts more intense because people are not connected in the same way. They are feeling separate. And I think that we need to address the pandemic of loneliness and separation and conflict that has plagued us at the same time as the pandemic. I think there are many proven models of conflict resolution, conflict transformation, and restorative justice that are useful in healing hurt in community. But I definitely feel it's important for us to also reframe how we look at peace building initiatives and think about the timing of peace building work. Too often peace work is only responsive and not proactive. We need to consider how we can create environments of greater equity, justice, nonviolent communication to make conflicts less likely beforehand, to work before the conflict happens, in other words. And this is positive peace building. Negative peace is the absence of conflict, right? It's sometimes a necessary precursor to positive peace building, but positive peace building is the presence of understanding, deep relationships, education, and systems that are just. It's attitudes and institutions, structures that create and sustain cooperation. Positive peace is about, it imagines peace as an environment with all of the characteristics that help human beings to flourish and live up to their potential. So the UN Sustainability Goals, Sustainable Development Goals are an example of positive peace building. And the Institute for Economics and Peace has a positive peace index that looks at 143 countries, I believe, and considers how each is doing using these metrics of positive peace building. The reason positive peace building, I think, is an important framework to look at is that it enables each of us, regardless of our profession, regardless of our age, to enter the stream, to make an impact, to think about how we can use our existing resources to build peace and community. Although we might not be able to eradicate all nuclear weapons in the world right now, there's always something that we can do in our communities, in our schools, in our organizations, in our neighborhoods. Think about the fact that today there is a capacity for each of us to use social media, to blog, to vlog, to self-publish, to reach out to those near and far, and to offer a soothing balm of understanding, to begin empathizing, to rewrite stories from the perspective of others, to share the perspectives of those who have been too long marginalized or in the shadows. Each of us has so much power, and yet so often we use social media simply to I think to distract ourselves or for the sensational. And I think it's a waste of a great opportunity. So my feeling is there's much work to be done, and all of us have the capacity to do it from behind, beside, beneath, or whatever direction we're coming.
Thank you for sharing that, and the whole idea of positive peace building. I think sometimes when people hear the word peace or peace building, it's almost overwhelming and they don't know where to start. And I know through your Seeds of Peace organization, you have a lot of training available to people. But if there were, you touched upon social media, but if there were one or two things that like the average person might be able to just institute in their own lives to start that conversation of peace building, what are some tangible things that are easier and not overwhelming for people to start off with?
Would you like me to answer? Mariko probably has good ideas as well, but
I do, and I want to talk to Mariko, Dr. Mariko, also, and both of you about that whole idea of forgiveness. So, you know, you touched upon the peace building and, you know, what we can do, but that whole idea of also being able to forgive and, you know, move on. So if you want to start it off, Dr. Maya, and then Dr. Mariko, if you want to jump in, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was thinking about gender. Here in Hawaii, we've seen some really great examples of, we have a Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women released a feminist post-pandemic economic recovery plan entitled Building Bridges, Not Walking on Backs. And it centers gender equality in our socioeconomic policy making. But I was thinking, you know, a lot of our Aina Aloha economic futures, really it's about community source solutions. And the point being that our community has so many great ideas. So in terms of peace building, I think that we can, for instance, do more to build a shared economy, a circular economy where we think about how we can support one another, you know, locally in terms of businesses. We can engage in sort of building peace within by working on mindfulness, engaging in reflective practice. We can use strength-based narrative to tell stories about the other that are restorative and positive. We can learn about others, lean into our discomfort and learn about others who are experiencing struggle and conflict. Right now, the communities in, for instance, the United States, Asian Americans are being targeted in terrible ways because of the pandemic. They're facing violence and racism. We have, of course, you know, Black Lives Matter and other conflicts. There are terrible economic challenges. And so sometimes hearing and understanding each other's stories and sharing empathy is a really positive first step, and leaning into your discomfort, having the capacity to create space in schools for restorative practices where we're not suspending children, but we are helping them to think about how they contribute to their communities and repair harm if they have done harm in classrooms or in the school. Doing that in our organizations as well, creating restorative justice circles. You can learn how to do that online. There's also much to be learned online through nonviolent communication. NVC, Marshall Rosenberg, has created a great many tools online, and you can learn about how to think about addressing people's universal needs as an important place to start. Needs are not to be conflated with pathways to achieve those needs. We can disagree on pathways to achieve needs, but needs like, you know, love and empowerment and growth and connection are non-controversial. We understand that everyone needs them. So helping people to learn those skills of communication or negotiation and mediation, those things are readily available online. I think that a lot of meditation anxiety is a real problem right now. And I would recommend using the tools of not just meditation, but in Japan and in Hawaii, there's forest bathing, there is sound bath, there are so many you know, tools that we can access to engage in work for anger management, as well as understanding our interbeing. I also think that return to environmental connection, looking at biomimicry and nature-based solutions for the environment, making commitments to trying to address to some degree the climate crisis by changing some of the things that we eat, or changing our resource use, using less, becoming more minimalist. These are all things that are very doable, that contribute to peace within, between, and service to the community.
Thank you. Thank you. And those are some hardcore, tangible things that we can all do. Dr. Mariko, what do you think?
Along the line that, because this is a very critical, you know, conversation that we're having, what the Dr. Meyer and then Desiree, you know, the Kyoko has been trying to do is to wake up our life, human system it's part of the whole ecosystem of environment in the climate. And then, there are so many areas that we need to really bring into the fruition when we organize our life, and then to educate, and then to live, whole the process of giving the birth to living, and then processing, and then, living our life, whole perspective of our mortality itself. It's amazing journey that we will embark and then build. And in our generation, we think about that, 40, 50 years ago, average maternity rate was only, 60 plus. And now we live, especially women, live 90 to 100 years. So in that aspect, we go through a very different dynamic system change. Our body and our ecosystem, to our political system, and so on. And it's very important that, especially now, I agree with what Maya said, whole aspect of biomimicking and others. But one thing it's coming to our life is this digital transformation, AI system. So it's really replacing our way of doing. And what the machine cannot do, but human can only do, it's this our emotion, our ability to make sure that we have a fine tuning of dealing with, the vulnerability and uncertainty. That it's the perfect storm of really appreciating the notion of, East meets West, because I saw just the title of this talk is that how we really understand the philosophical value of, the balancing act. In the East, we said in Buddhism also, our life is whole thing is to, we feel comfortable about not knowing, but really balancing, on the way you go. It's a meaning making process of how your life is confining, and then also, the developing it. There is a whole theory about this adult development theory, how you adult, evolve and develop, so that you can have a different way of perspective taking. Then you can have a, better healing system, and so on. So given the magnitude of the complexity that we have to deal with, we all need each other to make a better decisions. And then all the, the research showing that diversity actually brings a better decision and better innovation, better solution. So it's so critical that, diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, that we give a grant to, people who are marginalized, but, really bring to the mainstream of our conversation. The more we learn about each other, and the more we care and include them, we find the more commonalities, actually, not the, differences. So I think it's so critical that we give a spotlight, shed the light on, the people who have been left, but make sure that, we use all these different tools. Interestingly, in what the Taiwan is doing, something that, we need to take a look is, they don't use the word in the school system, literacy. I think most of the nation, especially advanced nation, use, what you teach is the literacy development, because the definition of literacy is defined by authority, that what it needs to be taught in the school. So Taiwan, they don't use it, they abolish the term literacy in the school. What they need to, what they have been implementing is that student has to take an issue. For example, that what's the political system in the world? What's the history? The student become investigative journal. So they have to, study about, okay, in the, the last, let's say, the 500 years, what are the political system emerged in the human system, okay, civilization, the communist, socialism, and then, the democracy, and then so on. And what are the information that is fake news, how you judge it, what is viable news? The student has to come up and then to give the viable responses. So that is really the actual teaching about what it needs to have, bottom line of what's the fact, in this amazing magnitude of information coming to us. I think it's so important that we teach student or ourselves too, to use the information that is more trusted or the processed information that is more useful for our life. So all these different techniques and a different way of thinking and the system that we should really actually question ourselves, what we have borrowed 20th century of model of education that is really have a strong assumption in it. It's a really developing stereotypical answer, stereotype of human life, but really to brush it out and then to build 21st century model of conversation and then building that. I think the younger kids, especially who are in currently 10 or teenage age, they have a very different way of decoding and then coding information and then to be useful knowledge. I think our educators need to make sure that they have a free road of developing their own system. So I really wanted to make sure that we help them to develop that skill rather than stopping them, to choose one confined way. One size fits all. It's no longer valid. That's the education that we learned. It doesn't apply to a future generation. So we have to question
Especially in
about.
Japan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, especially Japan is that's why nation is stuck. I can talk on and on, but I just as a single statement that this is in the traditional we call it paradigm shift or whatever the coin that you can choose, but it's really we have to be very much open and then open not the mind but heart. Neuroscience we teach that if you are so open in the mind that our neurons it's connect each other. That's the powerful way that we can really forge for the future and then develop future generation to have a better understanding of coming together. I think that's very critical.
Thank
So
you.
compassion, yeah.
And thank you, Jill Chinen, for asking questions, and both of you, thank you for answering the questions. But I want to ask both of you, then how can the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center us with our values, or what can we do to take a leadership role in this cross-cultural, or how can we be the solution to these social issues now?
Should I go on? Maya, do you have anything? Can I go on?
You can continue, yes. And then Dr. Maya.
Okay, I think it's Chinen-san, the raised the question.
Yes.
Kyoko?
Oh, no. That was the question about the attack to agents in the United States. But you folks kind of answered the question. But my question, the last question is, how can the center and what can we do to contribute to this leadership?
I think looking at the values and the mission of this center, it's so critical to really focus on selflessness of greater public goods, and then really to forge for showing the lead by examples and integrity and then take responsibility, all the virtue that you have created. That is really the vision and an agency that we need to all applaud and then aim for our life. I think that the activity that you are organizing needs to be more putting on in the front, that other people can join and be part of your whole activities. Especially for the Japanese audience, or because this is a Nisei, in our generation, this is a very serious issue. The young generation is losing the confidence. Every statistic you read, the number of students they're going abroad to study is shrunk. And then really a small number of young generation is now going abroad to study or have opportunity to actually learn. They're getting to be very insular looking, and then the exposure is really limited. I think Hawaii from Japan, it's much easier to come, geographically, and then also we have a lot of already existing relationship and friendship, like sister college or sister cities and so on. I think that we can really boost this engagement and exchange. It's really critical. It's very, very important for the future generation, especially for a Japanese generation to come to Hawaii to learn. There is a resistance, and there is a people who actually overcame to establish their life, and there is a way to find their own life goal, and then have a community to develop. I think Hawaii is an excellent location for the Japanese to come and learn the appreciation of life. The life can be enriched. So that's something that the Nisei, the center, can play. And then also for the larger community, for the rest of the the states in the U.S. I think Maya can talk further, but I think you have more the offering that you can make. That's something that I really need to strongly state, because it's a beauty and then also testimony of what you have been running. And then look at your preschool. The name is beautiful, a Kansha Center. It's appreciation center for the intergenerational, the dialogue, and then, the community that you can bring people together. There are not much center that tailor for that greater good for our interaction. So it's a beautiful, but we need to strengthen it. And then the more we echo it, I think the people will find that the value of what you do.
Thank you. We did started some small exchange between the preschoolers, and I think it's gonna fly. However, the COVID, of course, prevented it last year.
Yeah. So what is happening in Japan, younger generation, is that it's not a single-sided Japanese, ethnic Japanese. The younger generation, they are very unique, very mixed racial. They're, the passport, legal definition is Japanese, but there are so many beautiful mixed racial background of Japanese. So that is something that we need to think. See, the mind is so confined, the traditional way of categorizing people. But we have to really develop the naming, because that's a symbolic notion. It attached with the political stigma. We have to really rebuild that, redesign so that it's more inclusive. When people come to Hawaii, that there are different definition of Japanese, because the younger generation, they're blind for the color. For them, it's really they seeking for what is the really value of what to be Japanese, what to be a global citizens. So that is something that we really need to share that value of being a global citizen to really enhance their life and then commitment for inclusion.
Thank you. Dr. Maya, you have any advice for us?
I mean, Dr. Mariko said a lot of wonderful things, so I would just like to reiterate my appreciation for all of those suggestions, but also to say, yes, we have here in Hawaii, because of our indigenous as well as our Asian cultures, a natural collective approach to problem solving and leadership. And I think there are opportunities for the center, the Nisei Veterans, to really share a vision of leadership that enables us to lift each other up and to engage in work that is less about individual accomplishment and more about communal endeavors and taking care of one another with an expansive sense of family that is so important right now, including the values of aloha and the Nisei values, sharing successes and burdens, and and also the sense of navigating through the storms of this time. We have a lot of collective wisdom and intuition and experience to share in the experience of the Nisei veterans and in the stories of the past. But we also have to have a Pacific Futures approach, as we move through the challenges of this time with the backwards mapping, looking at what is the beloved community that we want to build, and looking at our communities as connected and as one, as Dr. Mariko said, and sort of global and then figuring out, okay, how do we reach that vision of community that is truly compassionate, and who do we put in our boat, and what do we do when the weather is inclement? But I think that you are a precious resource, and I thank you so much for putting together these conversations, and I think that, you know, encouraging difficult conversations, helping us to challenge ourselves is a big part of what needs to happen, and then to collaborate on our shared future.
Thank you. You know, listening to both of you, you're both doing such important work that really has positive global ramifications. And if we can take a little bit of your knowledge and try to, you know, filter that through some of the programs that we do, you know, it'll definitely be a better place. So thank you both for coming on today. We're going to come back to you both for some closing remarks, whatever bits of wisdom you would like to share. But before we do that, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes by. So thank you for staying with us. We wanted to let you know that Tom Kaufman is going to be our next Afternoon with the Author guest. He's going to be on Zoom on March 20th. He'll be talking about his book, How Hawaii Changed America. And then later on the 25th of March, General Bramlett will be coming back on for part 2 of his series, The Nisei Soldier in World War II. And this time he's going to be concentrating on the men of the 100th Infantry Battalion. Our next East Meets West talk is going to be on April 8th, and that's going to be with John DeFries, the head of Hawaii Tourism Authority, and Dr. Munehiko Harada. He's with Waseda University and also the International Recreation and Sports Management consultant. So that'll be interesting to hear their take on sports and also the upcoming Olympics. So we hope you tune in to both of these. You can find all of these programs on our website at nvmc.org. You can sign up there. And we hope you also visit our YouTube channel to see this and other recordings of talks that we have had. So I'm going to come back to you both for some closing remarks. And Mariko, Dr. Mariko, why don't we start with you? Some closing remarks to the people watching.
Thank you. We had a very interesting and a long discussion, but after listening, your next event, I felt such a vibrancy of this community. And then also what I have taken from what you have done is that the vitality of your community, that is the source and an essence of, we can really build the future. So, there are not so much theories or, the academic hat that I will give, but I think let's, stay who we are and then, the harness or nurture our spirit. And this is the Nisei Veterans, community. The spirit of their fought. I saw the historical background. Some couldn't return, but please imagine that what they gave the life to. They gave a life to our future, our generation. We all owned to live fullest of our extent of life that they gave us. So I think we, together, we can just keep working on it, and that's the only human, capacity that not the machine can do. But we will overcome the AI, but really build the community to continue to learn and then believe in us. Make sure that we include them. So I look forward to working with you further, and then good luck with your, the future event. And love to continue. And then please, celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th. That is so critical hopefully that, Maya and Kyoko and then I, and then others can have some, celebration for Maya's, mother and my mother and your mother. So life continues. And then thank you for, everyone and be part of it. And any comment, anything that you have, and I'm happy to get it and respond it to you. Well, all the best wishes to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gakiya. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to a long relationship with you. Then Dr. Maya.
Yes, thank you. I'm so grateful for you amazing women and for those of you who are on this call, new friends and community. I think that, part of what we are considering now is that human beings are both good and bad, destructive and creative, selfish and generous and magnanimous. And we have to welcome those shades of gray, our shadow selves, and have that self-acceptance and curiosity about the other, and love for our whole selves and for one another, and bridge our gaps. Part of this is I think we need to revise our definition of peace, which I believe is outdated and in need of rebranding. Peace is still too often seen as something ceremonial or symbolic, as something that only people in certain positions have power to enact. And I believe that having steady, rigorous, and ongoing peace work present within schools, organizations, families, community spaces will help equip stakeholders of every age with the tools they need to meet crises and be more resilient. So let's together rebrand peace so it's seen as something practical and action-oriented, something that is part of everyday work and leadership, regardless of your profession. There's, this notion that to make social change, one must reach a certain status or be an elected official or be a leader of a company, but really we can all dispel that notion. And young people are making enormous changes today, and there's nothing for them to wait for. So my final words are just, please let us support young people and use education as a platform to shout out and make peace loud and help to deepen humanity. Thank you all for all that you do. You're beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Dr. Soetoro. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate what you're doing. And we will try to be part of that rebranding of peace and make it part of our daily dialogue. So thank you. And Kyoko Kimura, how lovely it was to co-moderate with you today. I'd just like to turn it over to you for some final remarks and to close us out.
Thank you for both of you for taking the time and gave us and the 90 people who signed up with this webinar and listened to those beautiful women. Thank you so much. And by the way, this Hinado is 100 years old from my grandmother.
Oh,
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
beautiful. Yes.
All right. So
Stay
thank
tuned.
you, everybody.
On behalf of Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Stay tuned.
ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。